Welcome to NFL Nexus. The Green Bay Packers just made a huge move, locking in general manager Brian Gutekunst with a brand new contract extension. But was it the right call? I mean, this is a GM who's made some of the gutsiest, most brilliant moves we've seen, but he's also made some real head-scratchers. So today we're giving him a full report card. We're going to dive deep into the absolute home runs and the questionable calls that have really defined this era of Packers football.
And this, right here, wasn't just some standard press release. It was a massive statement. On January 30th, 2024, the Packers didn't just extend Gutekunst, they locked in the whole leadership team, head coach Matt LaFleur and executive Russ Ball too. This is the team planting their flag, telling the whole league, this is our crew. This is the brain trust we believe is going to get us back to the Super Bowl. It's a huge vote of confidence.
I mean, when you look at it, making the playoffs 6 out of the last 7 years, that's pretty darn good, right? That alone seems like a good reason. But that brings us to the real central question here. What exactly has Brian Gutekunst done to earn this level of trust, this long-term bet from the organization? In this explainer, we're going to pick apart his entire tenure. We're going to look at the moves that made him look like an absolute genius, and, well, we're also going to look at the ones that still have fans arguing. So let's get right into it. All right, first up, let's talk about the good stuff, the greatest hits of the Gutekunst era. If you really want to understand why the Packers are all in on this guy, you got to start with the A-plus moves on his report card. We're talking about the bold, landscape-changing decisions that have kept this team a contender year in and year out and have really built the foundation for everything they're doing right now.
You know, in the NFL, it all comes down to the quarterback. Everything. The QB is the sun, and the rest of the team is just planets orbiting around him. And for a GM, the absolute hardest job, the one that makes or breaks careers and franchises, is moving from one great quarterback to the next one. It's like walking a tightrope over the Grand Canyon with no net. And this, right here, this is where Brian Gutekunst made his biggest and, honestly, his most successful gamble.
So let's talk about the single move that will forever define his time in Green Bay, drafting Jordan Love. You got to rewind the clock to 2020. The Packers were literally one game away from the Super Bowl. They had Aaron Rodgers, a future first-ballot Hall of Famer, still playing at an MVP level. And what does Goody do? He trades up in the first round to draft his replacement. It wasn't just controversial, people thought it was insane. But now, you fast forward to today, and that gamble looks like an absolute stroke of genius that set the Packers up for the next decade.
Okay, so you've got your future quarterback waiting, but now you have to do something almost as hard, trade a living legend. It's one thing to draft a guy, it's another thing entirely to move on from an icon like Aaron Rodgers. And Gutekunst didn't just find a taker in the Jets, he played it perfectly. He got a huge haul of draft picks in return, and maybe even more importantly, he completely reset the team's books. He got out from under that massive contract, which gave the Packers the financial freedom to start building a brand new team around Jordan Love. Just brilliant asset management.
But Gut's big moves aren't just about quarterbacks. He's also shown he's willing to get aggressive in free agency, which is kind of rare for the Packers historically. Just look at his 2019 spending spree. The team was coming off a miserable 6-9-1 season, the Mike McCarthy era was over, they needed a jolt of energy, badly. And man did Gutekunst deliver. He brought in 4 guys who changed the team overnight. Za'Darius and Preston Smith, the Smith brothers, completely resurrected the pass rush. And Adrian Amos and Billy Turner instantly locked down huge holes in the secondary and on the O-line. So what was the result of that shopping spree? Well, it was immediate and it was massive. The Packers won 7 more games than the year before. 7! They went from 6-9 to a 13-3 powerhouse and went all the way to the NFC Championship game in Matt LaFleur's very first season as head coach. I mean, what a turnaround. It just goes to show you how Gut can identify the exact right guys to completely flip a team's fortunes. And it's not just free agency. His 2022 draft class is just a masterclass in roster building. He came into that draft loaded with picks, some of them from the Davante Adams trade we'll talk about later, and he just nailed it. He had a clear strategy: go get freak athletes from big-time schools. He took 2 guys from that legendary Georgia defense, Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. He got weapons like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. And maybe the best part? Finding gems like Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker in the later rounds, who are now their starting bookend tackles. This class right here is the core of today's team.
Okay, so it can't all be perfect, right? No GM bats 1,000, and Brian Gutekunst is no different. To give him a fair grade, we have to look at the other side of the coin. So now, let's get into the questionable calls, the fumbles, the misses, and the habits that have drawn some serious criticism, and maybe, just maybe, have held this team back from getting over the hump.
And let's start with the move that made that incredible 2022 draft class possible, the Devontae Adams trade. Look, the guys they got with those picks, like Quay Walker and Christian Watson, they're good players, no doubt. But the question that's always going to linger is, was it enough? Was that really enough of a return for a guy who was a legitimate Hall of Fame talent, maybe the best receiver in the entire NFL, right in the smack-dab middle of his prime? It's a debate that still fires up the fan base, for sure. And while that 2019 free agency class was a home run, his record since then has been a little shaky. You just have to look at the 2025 offseason for the proof. He went out and spent big, really big, trying to plug some major holes on the roster. He committed a combined $125 million to two guys, guard Aaron Banks and cornerback Nate Hobbs. The idea was that these were the final pieces to the puzzle.
The problem is, those signings were a total bust. They didn't just underperform, they flat out didn't work. The weaknesses at guard and corner were still there, and now the team is stuck with a massive bill. They're looking at having to pay out over $32 million in dead money. That's cap space for players who aren't even on the team anymore. It's a really expensive mistake and just shows that throwing money at a problem doesn't always fix it.
And then there's this really weird, almost unexplainable pattern in his drafting. The man just can't seem to hit on third-round picks. Seriously, look at this list. With a couple of recent guys who are still kinda TBD, this round has been a total black hole for him. Year after year, these guys just haven't panned out. For a GM who built his reputation on drafting and developing talent, it's a huge blind spot that's cost the team a ton of valuable depth over the years.
Okay, so we're circling back to the Jordan Love pick. And I know what you're thinking. You said that was a greatest hit. And it was. But it also belongs on this list for a totally different reason: opportunity cost. See, by trading up for a QB who was going to sit on the bench for 3 years, the Packers passed on getting a player who could have helped them win a Super Bowl right then. A guy like T. Higgins, who went just a few picks later, could have been that missing piece for a team that was already knocking on the door. It was a classic win-later move that might have cost them their best shot to win now with Rodgers.
And finally, there are a couple of philosophical things that just drive fans crazy. First, his loyalty to young, struggling players. The prime example is kicker Anders Carlson. The guy missed a league-worst 11 kicks in the regular season, and then he misses a huge one in a 3-point playoff loss. It was brutal. And then there's his refusal to ever make a move at the trade deadline. Every year, you see other contenders adding pieces for a Super Bowl run, and the Packers just stand pat. It's a long-standing team philosophy, but it's definitely a frustrating one. So, we've laid it all out. The incredible highs and the pretty frustrating lows, the franchise-altering moves and the head-scratching misses. So what's the final verdict here? Why did the Packers look at all of this, the good and the bad, and decide to double down on Brian Gutekunst for the long haul? Let's break it down and give a final grade.
At the end of the day, the simplest and maybe the strongest argument in favor of Brian Gutekunst is this number, 82. That's how many wins the Packers have during his 8 seasons as GM. That's the most in the entire NFC and the 4th most in the whole league during that time. You can analyze every single move, but the bottom line is, the guy puts a winning football team on the field year in and year out.
And that really gets to the heart of what it's like having Gutekunst as your GM. He's like a big-time home run hitter. He lives for the marquee move, the legacy-defining decision. He absolutely nailed the hardest thing to do, the QB succession. He's hit grand slams in free agency, but at the same time, he seems to strike out on some of the easier depth-building moves. The third-round picks, the 2025 free agency bust, those are the kinds of moves that build out a complete championship roster, and that's where he's been inconsistent.
But ultimately, here's what it all comes down to. This is the whole ballgame. Brian Gutekunst solved the single hardest puzzle in professional sports. He successfully navigated the transition from a Hall of Fame quarterback to the next franchise guy, and he did it seamlessly. That's a move that has absolutely wrecked other franchises for decades. And that monumental success, it outweighs all the other misses. It's why the organization trusts him, and it's why they believe he's the right guy to lead them into the future.
So, the stage is officially set. The Packers have their quarterback, they have a young, talented roster, and they have their GM locked in for years to come. The hardest part is done. But the big question now is, can Brian Gutekunst learn from his mistakes? Can he fix those blind spots and put those final championship-caliber pieces around Jordan Love? Can he finally bring another Lombardi trophy home to Green Bay? I want to know what you think. Drop a comment below and let us know. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, do us a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe to NFL Nexus for more. And for those of you looking for a fun way to support the channel, we've got some awesome NFL-themed coloring books out.
They're perfect for kids, adults, whoever. You can check them out with the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Thanks for watching.